WWE are interested in an independent wrestling brand, and are AEW set to announce a super show with New Japan Pro-Wrestling. But first, we have the real reason why the controversial AEW debut took place. This week on AEW Dynamite, wrestling rookie Satnam Singh would make his first appearance for the promotion, aligning himself with Jay Lethal and Sanjay Dutt to take out the new ROH television champion Samoa Joe. According to Grapsody's Will Washington, Singh has been pushed to television following the Discovery Warner Media merger, with it designed to create a big angle for the Indian market. Warner Media, who owns the TBS and TNT networks that air AEW television, has merged with Discovery, who owns Eurosports, the home of AEW television in India. Singh is a big star in India, having been the first Indian and Sikh player to be drafted into the NBA when he joined the Dallas Mavericks in 2015. Fightful Selector reporting that AEW are expecting huge social media traffic as a result of the angle, with Satnam Singh and Sanjay Dutt set to do promos targeted at the Indian market. The debut has caused some division amongst fans, with many feeling that it fell flat. We have the backstage reaction within AEW to the debut a little bit later on in the video, but first, let's take a look at the latest jump from WWE to All Elite Wrestling. According to PW Insider's Mike Johnson, former WWE producer Pat Buck was backstage at AEW Dynamite this week, 10 days after he resigned from his role in WWE. He is said to have been working as a producer on the show. Buck would quit WWE following his involvement in the main event of WrestleMania 38 Night 2 between Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns for the undisputed WWE Universal title, a match which he produced alongside Michael Hayes. He would then release a statement stating that he had accomplished everything that he wanted to in his 3 years with the company. Buck will now be running a lighter schedule in his position in AEW, allowing him more time to run his Create a Pro Wrestling Academy in Long Island, which he co-owns with Brian Myers, the former Kurt Hawkins in WWE. Buck joins a number of his former trainees in AEW, including MJF, Chris Statlander, and Hook. Next, we have an update on some expiring Impact Wrestling contracts. In yesterday's video, we discussed how the contracts of both members of the Good Brothers were set to expire on July 17th, in around 3 months' time. The duo have since confirmed the news in an interview with Lucha Libre Online last night. Despite speculation surrounding their future, Doc Gallows would discuss their current home in Impact, suggesting that they will eventually re-sign with the promotion, calling it the place to be, and he would say, "Look at Impact Wrestling in the last 6 months. It's a hot company and there is so much going on. You talk about all those companies and we've seen talent from all of those companies in the last 6 months pass through Impact Wrestling or attempt to, and some succeed to make Impact Wrestling their home. It's a hot place to be. The schedule is great, you never know what's going to happen on our television show. You truly don't know what's going to happen when you turn on Impact. However you see Impact, it's must see. We want to be part of that. The Good Brothers are hot, they stay hot. Bullet Club is back, running full-fledged." Carl Anderson would double down on this, declaring loyalty to Impact President Scott D'Amore, and he said, "In the 5 minutes we left WWE unceremoniously, Impact President Scott D'Amore called us immediately. We're loyal to Scott, we're loyal to Impact, and we're proud of the product. We want people to get eyes on it and see it. Impact is something special." The Good Brothers recently rejoined Bullet Club alongside Jay White and Chris Bay, and it looks like they're going to continue their run with BC in Impact, whilst continuing to work New Japan Pro Wrestling shows via the working agreement between the two promotions. Next up, we have some interesting information on some recent WWE name changes. Over the last few months, a number of established WWE and NXT talents have been rebranded with either shorter or entirely new names. In an update provided in the Wrestling Observer newsletter by Dave Meltzer, the reason behind several of the changes were given, and Dave would write, "The actual story behind this is all the talent got a memo and Vince McMahon decreed he doesn't want anyone new using their real names anymore, nor names they've used before on the indie scene. Walter became Gunther because Walter was both his real name and a name he used on the independent scene. Raquel Gonzalez became Raquel, not her real name, but had to drop the Gonzalez, her real name. Many thought Austin Theory dropped the Austin because of Steve Austin, but it's actually because his real name is Austin White. Raul Mendoza is a WWE name, except Raul really is his first name, so he had to ditch it. As is always the case, the memo only applies to people who are newer and who they decided it applies to. Randy Orton isn't going to change his name to Frank Trevino, and Brock Lesnar and Ronda Rousey don't have this apply to them. It would be nutty if Riddle has to change his name because Riddle really is his last name, but it looks like this applies mostly to people just coming to the main roster, and this doesn't apply to Cody Rhodes. Humberto Carrillo isn't a pushed name, but his real name is Humberto. Pete Dunne had to be Butch. As for Marcel Bartel, who knows, past somebody didn't like the name since Marcel Bartel was a WWE-owned name that he never used until WWE. But from this point forward, they don't want anyone new using former names from elsewhere or real first or last names, except if you're Gable Steveson, and this will change soon enough like it always does. WWE's current mantra is inconsistent at best, and it remains to be seen how many more names will be changed going forward, or how long this attitude will last. And next up, let's go back to the Satnam Singh situation as we have the backstage reaction to his divisive debut. According to Fightful Select, several members of the AEW roster agreed that the debut wasn't executed well, but feel that the business reason for the decision made sense. Several members of the roster have said that they reacted in a similar way to many fans, feeling that it fell flat, from the placement on the show as well as how the lights went out before he appeared. One wrestler noted that doing a lights out for an unknown talent isn't optimal, adding that it should have been done another way. Despite this, there was some optimism within the camp around how the angle will help the promotion business-wise, but none of the talent Fightful heard from felt it was executed well from a creative standpoint. With that said, some talent feels that if AEW do well in the Indian market, this will help boost their salary during renegotiations. Wrestlers who have seen Singh train or have trained him have said that he has been working every day for the last 8 months on his wrestling and has some tricks up his sleeve that will surprise people. He is said to have a good attitude and wants to learn. But what do you think of the whole situation? Did you like the debut? And if not, can you see the bigger picture for the growth of the company? Let me know in the comments down below. Next up, we have some news regarding WWE's interest in an independent wrestling brand. In this week's Wrestling Observer, it was noted that WWE has interest in the Bloodsport brand of Game Changer Wrestling, and this was confirmed by GCW owner Brett Lauderdale. He stated on his podcast that the biggest wrestling company in the world has expressed interest in the Bloodsport brand. Bloodsport is an event held in GCW, often multiple times a year, and has a very unique presentation. Usually, competitors have some kind of legitimate combat sports background as well as pro wrestling, with them competing in semi-shoot style fights inside a ring with no ropes. The only way to win is by knockout or submission, designed to emulate the early days of mixed martial arts. The first event was billed as Matt Riddle's Bloodsport before he signed with WWE in 2018, and then the show would be taken over by Josh Barnett, who is a former UFC heavyweight champion. The WWE interest in Bloodsport is surprising due to the bloody nature of the fight. However, Lauderdale was pictured alongside Stephanie McMahon during WrestleMania weekend, and he was present in a luxury box at WrestleMania Sunday. Brett would also note on his podcast that McMahon swung by to say hello and had some very nice things to say about GCW. Where this interest goes is currently unknown, but the news is surprising to say the least. And finally, could we be set to see the long-awaited AEW vs New Japan Super Show? This week on AEW Dynamite, it was revealed that there will be a huge announcement next week on the show. This has led to speculation on what the news could be, including a Ring of Honor television deal, a New Japan Pro-Wrestling Super Show, or an AEW streaming deal, all possible options that fans have speculated on. Well, this week on the Super J-Cast podcast, a reliable source for all things New Japan, it was speculated that the announcement could involve a super show with the AEW roster, taking on wrestlers from the biggest Japanese promotion in the world. It was teased on the podcast that the show could take place on June 3rd in a Chicago-based stadium. Interestingly, New Japan will be in Chicago this Saturday for the Windy City Riot event, headlined by a match between AEW's Jon Moxley and NJPW's Will Ospreay, a potential sign of things to come. The speculation follows the recent news that all Elite Wrestling television shows will soon soon air on New Japan World, NJPW's own streaming service, a sign that the relationship between the two companies is beginning to strengthen. It's really important to know that this is just speculation from Joel and Damon on the Super J-Cast, and it isn't a report or leak by any means, unlike what some other outlets are reporting, although the hosts did make hints towards knowing something that we don't. All signs seem to point to the fact that New Japan and AEW could be going head-to-head in Chicago this summer, which would be huge for the pro wrestling world. But let me know which New Japan versus AEW match that you'd like to see in the comments down below. And before you go, make sure you check out 10 things that you didn't know about AEW's Hook.